Most industrial companies do not fail in Ukraine because of war. They fail because they burn 250,000 euros before they understand the architecture of the market. If you enter Ukraine without a structure, you're not expanding, you're gambling. Alright, listen carefully. In the next minutes, I will show you three things. First, the three structural mistakes companies make when they enter Ukraine. Second, the three-layer architecture model we use before anyone spends serious money. And third, the point where market entry becomes too risky to handle internally. And please listen carefully through every step because there's a free model under this video. Download it after you watch this video. It will help you apply this logic to your own business. My name is Gazki and I'm the managing director of Gazki Ltd. Since 2012, we've been building and managing international trade flows of physical industrial products and professional business services between Ukraine and over 25 countries across the world. And we've helped industrial manufacturers avoid six-figure misallocations, money burnt on subsidiaries, agents, misaligned joint ventures, and so on, simply because the entry architecture was wrong. So what I'm going to explain here is not a desk research, it's execution architecture directly from the field. Here's how we're going to do this. I will show you now where most companies structurally go wrong and why that mistake costs them the most. Then I will break down our three-layer go-to-market architecture, the model we use to enter Ukraine intelligently. And at the end, I will show you a real case, three cutting tool manufacturers, same product category, but three completely different entry strategies, and why. Let's assume you're an industrial manufacturer. Maybe you produce milling tools, drilling tools, turning inserts, something that factories actually consume every day, right? So you look at Ukraine and on paper, it looks very attractive. There's a large industrial base, heavy machinery, metal processing plants, automotive suppliers, agricultural equipment producers, and also defense-related manufacturers. So the opportunity looks enormous. But here's the first reality check. Ukraine is not one market. Ukraine is a mosaic of regions, industrial clusters, ownership structures, and decision-making cultures, and procurement logic. And if you enter blindly, you will not test the market. You will burn time, money, and reputation. This is the very first structural mistake. Most companies choose the entry structure before they verify market architecture. They start with the legal step. They start with incorporation. They start with, let's open an office, let's hire a sales team, or let's sign a partner. But they do it before they know where real demand sits. So how purchasing reality really works and who truly controls decisions. And once you do that, capital burn just accelerates. Now, here's a key insight that most people do not like to hear, but it's true. Market entry failure is rarely about the product. It's almost always about the architecture. We've seen a lot of industrial companies entering Ukraine that choose one of three obvious options. The first is opening a subsidiary. You hire a sales team, you hire technical managers, you rent office space, and you commit to payroll. The problem is not the subsidiary itself. The problem is that it is expensive and slow. You can easily expose yourself to 150,000 or even 300,000 euros before you even have real traction. And there's zero guarantee of traction if the market's architecture is not validated first. The second option is hiring a local agent. This looks attractive because fixed costs are low, right? But the real risk is dependency and transparency. If you build your entire market entry on one person, you often have zero visibility into the customer relationships and zero control over the pipeline. You may think you have a market, but in reality, the agent owns the market, not you. The third option is a joint venture. A joint venture can be very powerful, but it comes with high complexity, high legal exposure, and high alignment risk. If you're not aligned on your strategy, margins, and control, you can lose far more than money. You can lose time and brand trust. Now, I want to be very clear with you. None of these options that I just mentioned are automatically wrong. No, but choosing any of them without data is wrong. This is where we've seen many companies fail. They choose the structure first, and only then they try to figure out the market. What you actually need is not legal structure. What you really need is a go-to-market execution roadmap. You need to know which exact sectors consume your product, not industry in general, but which sectors in Ukraine consume your specific product category. You need to know which factories are currently buying from Germany, Poland, China, Turkey, and so on, and why. You need to know the price levels, the real volumes, the procurement structures, the payment terms, and the decision hierarchy, because what looks like demand on paper can be completely different in reality. And if you do not have benchmarks and up-to-date numbers, you will build assumptions into your entry model, and assumptions are what burn money. So we do not start with incorporation. We start with the architecture. At Gazki, we built a structured market entry model specifically for industrial manufacturers. It has 3 layers. And I want you to remember this. Data alone is never enough. Relationships alone are not enough. And execution alone is not enough. Ukraine requires all 3 in the right order. First, the market intelligence layer. Here we analyze customs and trade flow data, import volumes by HS code, regional consumption clusters, industrial concentration by region, competitor positioning, existing distributor networks, and also public tender participation. But what we're really doing is simple. We map real demand, not theoretical demand. We map observed buying behavior. And here's the red flag. If your positioning is defined before verified demand mapping, entry risk is very high, because then you're shaping your strategy around what you want the market to be, not what it really is. Second is the decision and access layer. This is where most foreign companies fail, because they assume Ukraine is the same as Western Europe. It is not. Ukraine is highly relationship driven. And even more importantly, industrial purchasing decisions are rarely made by the CEO or the top management. In cutting tools, for example, the real decisions often sits within the production engineer, the chief technologist, or the maintenance director. These people influence tool selection, standards, tolerances, and even which brands are allowed into the process. So in this layer, we identify the decision makers inside the target factories. We map procurement architecture, we understand technical evaluation procedures, and we identify who truly influences selection. And here's the red flag. If your outreach targets titles instead of influence architecture, traction will stall. You will think you're doing business development, but in reality, you're selling into a wall. The third layer is execution architecture. Only after we have mapped data and access do we define whether you go direct sales, distributor model, or hybrid. We define regional focus, technical demonstration strategy, pilot project, pricing architecture, payment structure, and risk mitigation. And what comes out of it is not a PowerPoint. It is an operational playbook, a roadmap for execution. And here's another red flag for you. If legal incorporation happens before you validate layers 1 and 2, capital burn simply accelerates. Now, let me show you how this works in real life. We did exactly this for 3 manufacturers, one from Korea, one from Germany, one from China, all producing industrial cutting tools, milling cutters, drilling systems, turning inserts. But each had a different positioning. The German producer focused on premium precision. The Korean producer competed on a balanced quality price, and the Chinese manufacturer targeted high volume segments. Now, here's the key point. Instead of sending sales representatives randomly across Ukraine, we structured everything. First, we mapped which Ukrainian sectors consume the highest volume of cutting tools. Secondly, we identified which factories import from the European Union versus Asia. Third, we benchmarked pricing tiers across the segments. Fourth, we determined tolerance standards required by Ukrainian end users. And fifth, we designed pilot entry clusters in Dnipro, Zaporizhia, and in Kharkiv. The result, we helped one client avoid a costly full-scale market entry by identifying the exact product line with the strongest initial fit instead of launching everything at once and freezing capital in unsold inventory sitting in warehouses. For another, we shifted their positioning entirely after we discovered that Ukrainian buyers valued service response time more than brand prestige. And for the third, we structured entry through technical demonstration partnerships rather than distributors. 3 companies, same product category, 3 completely different market entry architectures. Because strategy must follow data. Most market entry consultants will give you reports, most agents will promise you contacts, most law firms will set up entities. We are none of the above. We are a practicing trade and service company that operates under real conditions in the field, in Ukraine. We combine data, industrial understanding, on-the-ground presence, and execution capability. And that combination is rare. It is also extremely difficult to replicate because our intelligence tools are built over years of real trade flows, not desk research. Ukraine's industrial landscape is enormous. That part is true. But opportunity without structure becomes chaos. So if you want to enter Ukraine with an industrial product, do not start with incorporation. Start with architecture. Start with mapping. Start with understanding. Because the companies that prepare properly do not try Ukraine. They built Ukraine into their long-term growth model. And that is exactly what we help you do. So if you're a manufacturer of industrial tools or any industrial product and you're evaluating Ukraine seriously, the question is not should we enter? The real question is, are we prepared to enter intelligently? And here's the professional threshold. If your planned market exposure exceeds 250,000 euros, if you're considering a subsidiary, if joint venture discussions are underway, if distributor dependency might exceed 50% of your projected revenue, or if you have never done verified trade flow analysis, then you should not deploy capital before you structure architecture. Download our 3-layer Ukraine go-to-market architecture model under this video. And if your exposure is material and you want a confidential, structured review of your Ukraine strategy, apply for a confidential 15-minute strategy call. We do not sell services. We build market entry architecture. If you found this information useful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. See you next week.